I was living in Mississippi at the time, in a small community called Diamond Head. Community full of elderly people who really, people who should have been dead for a while, but for some reason were still, alive and kicking it and needed, some cheap place to live with their retirement money that had, really pretentious country clubs and golf courses and yacht clubs. I mean, all the really boring, bland, vanilla shit that old people like. It was basically a geriatrics paradise. We heard the storm was coming, Katrina, and no one took it seriously because storms come and go all the time, and on the news, every storm is sold to you as this could be the big disaster. This storm is going to destroy your fucking house. This storm is going to break into your house at night, kill your kids, rape your wife. Every storm is going to be the biggest disaster ever. And 9 times out of 10, the storm comes, the trees blow around, kind of spooky, There's some thunder. Maybe there's a tornado in the next county. Doesn't fucking do shit. And you feel like a jackass if you bother evacuating. And everyone thought it was just going to be like that. Everyone thought that this was just another fluke. This was not fluke, just another, case of the news blowing things out of proportion, because our experience was that this is what happens, My brother, of course, is a totally paranoid guy, and he evacuated 3 days before, because he evacuates for every storm, which, turned out to be the smarter course of action. So he evacuated 3 days before. And I did not evacuate. I chose to stay home because I am a homebody and I don't like leaving my house unless I have to. At least not for a prolonged period of time. The day before the storm hit, it was pretty apparent that this storm was going to really be the big one. It was still a Category 5, and it was heading directly for us. A lot of people have this misconception now that the storm hit in New Orleans. That's not the case. It hit pretty much exactly where we were. It pretty much struck Diamond Head, Bay St. Louis area. And we left the day before, luckily, because it became apparent that this really was going to be the big storm. And we escaped to Alabama. That's as far as we could get because the traffic was terrible trying to get out of there. Meanwhile, at the same time, my stepmother's aunt was dying. So my father and my stepmother decided that they were going to drive up to New York to see if they could see my stepmom's aunt before she died. And they parted ways with me in Alabama, leaving me with our 3 dogs, 2 of which I'm not too fond of. I'm at a hotel that I cannot bring the dogs inside, so I have to keep them in the car. Luckily, it was not very hot. It was relatively cool outside. Otherwise, I don't know what I would have done. Of course, some remnants from the storm show up in Alabama after the storm has done its damage to the coast. It worked its way up to the part of Alabama that I was in. And and by that time it only had the strength of a minor tropical storm. It was no longer hurricane strength, but it was still powerful enough to knock out the power in the hotel that I was staying at. And I didn't want to leave the hotel because I'd already paid for it, and I didn't know where else I could possibly go. And I was unable to get in touch with anyone in my family because I didn't have a cell phone at the time. And of course I couldn't call on the hotel phone because the power was out completely. I went on a drive looking for a payphone, could not find one. I spent about a day in the hotel with the power out, waiting for it to come back on so that I could call someone. I was, I think, out of the entire hotel, the only guest that elected to stay once the power went out. It gave me an opportunity to catch up on my reading anyway. I finally, the power in the hotel came back on, and I called my mom and my brother, who were in St. Louis, and they told me to come drive to where they were. So I drove to St. Louis in the car that the dogs had been in for the last 2 days or so. So, of course, the car smelled like dog, and the dogs barked constantly. And I couldn't stop for dog food, so I would just feed them hamburgers from fast food places on the road. But finally, I reached St. Louis, where I stayed for another 2 or 3 days, crammed in the house with my gay uncle and his black boyfriend, black husband, actually, Dean. Dean is his husband's name, and Dean is a very private person. He doesn't like people to be around in his house, and he was not so rude as to actually say anything, but it was pretty apparent that the presence of all of these people in his house was getting to him. Meanwhile, what was going on with my dad and my stepmom was that they had reached New York just a little too late to see my stepmom's aunt before she died. She died, I think, that night. I think about 3 or 4 hours before they got into town, which is, quite unfortunate, but didn't happen to me, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend that that's what I gave a shit about. Dad called and told me to come to New York. So Scotty and I loaded up the car and we made the drive from St. Louis to New York nonstop, which I don't recommend for anybody. It was a 20-hour drive, and I don't think either of us slept because neither of us trusted the other to drive while they slept, because we both did not trust the other's driving abilities. And we reached New York, and Dad says, all right, we're leaving tomorrow to go back to Louisiana, to go back to Mississippi to see what's going on with the house. Of course, we just got back from a 20-hour drive. We had no interest in driving that day, but Dad is not the kind of person you say no to. He's, when he says something, that's pretty much what goes. And that's not just for me because I'm his son, that's for anybody. He has a way of getting people to do what he wants them to. So, despite the fact that we have no interest whatsoever in doing this, we drive back down to Mississippi. The town we live in is just destroyed. I mean, there's nothing left. I mean, it's all wreckage, and the fucking place, the Mexican restaurant where I used to eat my lunch almost every single day was a pile of sticks on the fucking ground. I mean, there was nothing left. There was not any semblance of a structure. It was just demolished completely. Houses were destroyed. Our house, pieces of the oak tree next to our house had fallen on it. It wasn't damaged too badly. In fact, our house was one of the least damaged in the area. I remember we got there and we surveyed the damage in Diamond Head, and it was unbelievable. And you can't. I mean, it doesn't matter how many pictures you see of something like that. You just don't understand until you see it with your own eyes. Until you've seen somewhere that you have lived destroyed, you really don't understand what that's like. It's just so, I don't want to say humbling, but it's the closest word I can think of right now. And there's a lot of trees in Diamond Head and in Mississippi in general, and I would say out of every tree for every tree that was still standing, 2 were knocked down or broken half. It just incredible power behind this storm. And of course, the town looked nothing like it was like we'd left it. And there was this little trail in back of our house, a golf cart trail, because we live next to a golf course, and there was this golf cart little road that went along the whole course, and I used to go for my walks on it. So I decided I was going to go for a walk on my trail to go and see the damage on foot, because we'd only seen it in the car up till that point. And I was walking along, and I saw a television set in the middle of the golf course, among some other debris. And I thought that's an interesting visual, and I went with my digital camera, and I took a picture of it. I probably still have it on my hard drive. If anyone's interested, I can look for them. But picture didn't really turn out that well, because my digital camera is nothing great, and I don't really have a photographer's eye, I guess, because what looked really impressive in person didn't really look all that spectacular on the camera. But as I was taking pictures of this television set, I noticed this really small figure lying face down under some debris, about the size of a small child. And I've spent a lot of my life, or I had spent a lot of my life up until that point, hating my species and feeling like death is not something that I'm frightened by, not something that I'm weirded out by in the slightest. But I see this small body, and it's like someone reaches into your chest and twists your heart, and you feel like it stops beating. My lungs felt constricted, and I went over to the body, and I'm just looking at it, and the moment is just so surreal because I can't believe I'm looking at the body of a dead child buried under this debris. I'm like, how the fuck is this even here? How could someone leave their kid here? I mean, don't these parents know that their kid is dead? I know that the parents are probably still alive because I don't see them anywhere in this debris. And I'm trying to figure out what I should do. Whether I should lift the debris up and turn it over to see this kid's body, or if I should go get the police. There's no police station in Diamond Head. If I should go get my father or somebody. But I decide that I can't leave without seeing the body, unobstructed. Because otherwise, I mean, I don't know. I don't know whether it was morbid curiosity or what. Something in me needed to see it. To make sure that this wasn't some kind of trick. And I lifted the debris from on top of the body, and it turns out that it was just a scarecrow. A little novelty scarecrow that someone probably had on their porch. I've never felt so relieved in my life. But even though it wasn't actually a dead child, I never forgot how I felt in those moments. And I realized that I couldn't go on pretending to hate my own species. Pretending that I'm heartless, that I don't care. Because when I was faced with it, really confronted with it face to face, when I was really in that moment, I reacted the same way that any person that didn't espouse my philosophies at that time would have. I was scared and frightened and unsure of what to do, and I felt like the world was crashing down on me. And I felt angry at the cruelty of this cold and dispassionate universe that we all inhabit. Such a stupid thing to be angry at, but I was angry at it anyway. After that, well, we made the decision to move to California, and we drove a U-Haul truck and 2 U-Haul trailers up to California. It was a bitch to find that U-Haul truck and those U-Haul trailers, but like I said, my dad is a man who gets what he wants. And he wanted those things, and he found them, goddammit. Because he's one persistent son of a bitch. And we made the drive from Mississippi, basically Louisiana, because we were right on the border of Louisiana, to Los Angeles, actually Palmdale, but, same thing, really. We made that drive about 3 times, me and my brother did. My dad only made it once. We went back and got things twice. And it's not a drive that I care to ever make again in my life. I have made it again since then to go to my aunt's funeral. We should have just flown. We're stupid. And we spent the first few years, not the first few years, the first few months in California living in the Ramada Inn, searching for a house. Leased one for a while, then we bought this one. And the rest is history. But it was a very stressful time. And there's a lot of smaller stories that really go into it. For instance, I remember after the storm, none of the stores would sell liquor. And I made the remark to someone that, why are you prohibiting liquor when people need it the most? And of course, this pissed my dad and my brother off. They thought I have no common sense. They acted like someone was going to shoot me for making a joke, I guess. And of course, you know, when we got to California, I remember everyone was talking about it. And I remember I was in a Best Buy. And the first time I went to Best Buy in California, I was amazed because Best Buy in California and Best Buy in Mississippi are not the same fucking thing. You guys actually had there's actually multiple lanes here, whereas in Mississippi there's only one checkout counter with a really long line. I guess that they just protest against efficiency for whatever reason. I guess it's just Southern tradition to be grossly inefficient. Anyway, these two guys are there, and they're talking about it, and they're like, well, what do you expect? You build your city right on the coast. You know hurricanes are in that area. Like, this town's built on the San Andreas fault line, assholes. There could be a fucking huge earthquake at any time. At least with a fucking hurricane, there's advance warning. You know, people are such fucking idiots. They don't think about what they say whatsoever. Especially, there were evacuees all over the place. I mean, we weren't the only ones around. I mean, it was really stupid and insensitive of them to be talking about that shit. Of course, I'm stupid and insensitive myself, but I just happened to catch them, and I pointed out their stupidity to them in an interesting way. Yeah, it was a fucking tough time. Changed a lot of my views on things in ways that I don't even know if I can explain. But I guess I've been talking a long time now, so I'll shut the fuck up. Amazing Atheist, peace the fuck out. Hope you enjoyed your story, Nana Shimara.